Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 2, Frenzy, by John Allen Price. Chapter 3.
First to leave, last to return,
remarked Colonel Rolf Kriegler, running through various calculations on a handheld computer.
According to this, he ran out of fuel a minute 45 seconds ago. Did you factor in single-engine flight?
Said the strikingly beautiful woman standing next to the base commander. First Lieutenant Anna Lindholm smiled as she talked, but it did not hide her anxiety.
I'm well aware of your friend's tricks. I've figured in single-engine operation. He's been out of fuel now for 2 minutes. Then declare an emergency. Activate our own radar and send out rescue ships. We know what his bearing was from the last base up the line. We have to
do nothing, Krieger completed.
As my security officer, you're well aware of our mission orders. We're to maintain complete electronic emissions control until new orders are received. We didn't communicate with our aircraft when they left. We can't as they return. Colonel, we have something on the motion scanners, said the base air defense officer. He emerged from his control center near the base's flight line and approached the group of officers waiting beside the newly returned helicopters. An aircraft at high altitude and descending. The storms are interfering with our optical systems. We won't be able to identify it until it's almost on top of us. What about its infrared signature? Maybe you can't identify the individual ship, but you can tell its type. I'm sorry, we can't. The approaching aircraft has no infrared signature. It's like a glider. Put your defenses on alert, said Kriegler. We may have a Capitol Cutlass ship. No, it's him, said Lindholm, smiling again. It's Maximilian. An anxious minute later, a Python helicopter dropped through the cloud deck of the storm front, advancing on the Bauhaus jungle base. Except for the armored hovercraft and other gunships sitting on its hangar apron, Base Aquila looked like a civilian research station set in the Venusian jungle territory controlled by Bauhaus. Most of its other military equipment was hidden, either in its buildings or in the surrounding rainforest. Its active missile launchers and air defense guns tracked the helicopter until it could be visually identified. The only sound the Python made on its approach was the whisper of its main rotor windmilling. Its sink rate appeared dangerously high until the last 100 feet, then it pitched up and flared out. With a solid thump, the auto-rotating helicopter hit the base's manicured flying field. Its main wheel struts were compressed fully, and the wheels themselves were almost buried in the turf. By the time the rescue vehicles and base personnel reached the gunship, its pilot was climbing down from the command cockpit. I knew it was you, Lindholm shouted, rushing into his arms and embracing him. Why were you the last to leave the target? I had to hold off one serious threat to our mission, said Captain Max Steiner, releasing Anna and stripping off his helmet. His long hair matted with sweat. It stuck to his neck and forehead, though it still managed to curl. We lost 4 aircraft, 3 of them gunships, to a lone Capitol Special Forces Cutlass. Its crew was good. Our only serious losses were to them, and we would have lost more had they not run out of ammunition. So we heard, Capitan, said a civilian using Steiner's rank. Alton Pearson wore no rank insignia on his white jacket, except for the gold Bauhaus
emblems on its lapels. The military personnel swarming over the gunship gave him a wide berth as he walked up to Steiner and Lindholm.
Our agent in Roswell transmitted a curious report. You ended the combat when you could have destroyed this ship and departed after saluting its crew.
They were helpless, Mr. Administrator. I'll not wantonly kill such soldiers. And by occupying their attention, I achieved the same goal as I would have by killing them. The remainder of our strike was about to be successfully withdrawn, not only from Roswell, but across Capitol line as well.
And you nearly lost your own machine for this act of chivalry. You're no doubt an excellent pilot, but I question the tactical ability in light of your adherence to such ideals.
And I question the tactical need for this entire mission, Steiner countered, his eyes narrowing, as if he were looking through a weapon aiming system. We lost those planes and all those people. For what? To kidnap a lone mental patient of no apparent stature with us or Capitol?
Maximilian, this is best discussed later,
said Lindholm, stepping between the two antagonists.
At your debriefing.
No, Anna. This question won't be answered later. I've been at enough debriefings to know what happens. I want this question answered now.
If you were any other pilot, I'd have you relieved of duty for making such a demand,
said Pearson.
But I'm aware of your connections with corporate board members, so you'd learn this soon anyway. Come.
Pearson motioned for Lindholm and Steiner to walk with him to the base's flight operations building. They were joined by Kriegler, and while there were personnel running around them, they were largely left alone.
That woman, Lorraine Coving, is the most important nobody amongst our populated worlds,
Pearson continued, involuntarily glancing over at the base's small hospital.
She may be the only human to have been captured by the Dark Legion and escape relatively intact.
What? Them? Those ghosts, the Rangers, keep claiming they're fighting? Said Steiner, incredulous.
We risk starting a war with one megacorp that can defeat us for some mental patient who claims she was kidnapped by ghosts? She claims nothing,
said Kriegler, already breathing heavily and sweating in his effort to keep up with the others.
Dr. Riesner told us she's virtually comatose. It'll be some time before she tells us anything. What we know about her was gathered by intelligence,
Lindholm added.
She may be the only survivor of a Dark Legion attack on a capital settlement here. On Luna, she was rescued by an elite team of mercenaries working for Mishima. For some reason, they sent her back here, where Capitol Security picked her up at their Atlantis spaceport. That was 10 days ago. Now we have her.
What's next? Will Imperial or the Brotherhood steal her from us? Said Steiner, still incredulous. I know several members of our Duke Elector families, and they're openly disdainful of this Dark Legion. They believe it's some deception the Brotherhood's using to gain control over us.
In the past, the Duke Electors and the board has been disdainful of any external threat to us. That attitude has cost us greatly, and now at last it's changing. Our Rangers have fought too many skirmishes with this shadowy legion for its threat to be dismissed any longer. We must be ready to accept any risk and make any sacrifice to stop it.
If anyone but you had told me this, I wouldn't believe it, Steiner admitted, catching Anna's hand and getting her to look him in the eye.
Perhaps this legion is real and dangerous enough to be taken seriously. I only wish we had a better way to get information than attack Capitol for it.
Now wait just a damn minute, Hunter responded sharply. Accusing us of interfering with those two is one thing. Accusing us of failure to stop the Bauhaus attack is another game, and we're not playing it. Hunter briefly pointed across the black polished table at Sutter and Bamble. Washed and dressed in fresh gray suits, they hardly looked as if they had spent any time in the desert. By contrast, Hunter and his squad still wore their dusty, sweat-stained fatigues. In the hours since the debriefing began, piles of fine sand had collected at the squad's side of the table. A small puff of sand lifted off its surface when Hunter dropped his hand.
If you'll recall, you specifically ordered my ship not to be rearmed after I requested it,
said Alvarez, picking up the attack the moment Hunter stopped.
We would have at least had full munition loads for my ship. If you'll recall, Mr. Hart corrected. The session is being recorded, and I insist you use correct protocol.
Protocol, here we go again, muttered Vanetti. How I hate debriefings.
Yes, Sergeant, you have something to say?
Yeah, Calvin, I got something. You may want everyone else to think of you as Mr. Hart, but to us, you'll always be Calvin. Captain, control your men. We've had it with their cheap cracks, Bamble said angrily. His rage built until he snapped the pen he'd been bending, its ink running all over his hands. Hey, Bungle, we sure named you correctly, said Shacker. What are you going to do next? Chew on a shoe?
You call this a special forces unit?
Hart questioned.
Captain, this is insubordination, and it's contempt for authority.
Well, maybe if this were a real debriefing and not an interrogation, you wouldn't have this problem, said Hunter. We've executed our mission successfully, and we were the only ones to provide any effective opposition to the Bauhaus attack. I'd like to know how they could get this far inside our own territory without being picked up on our defense net.
For a time, they flew along the boundary between our district and District Landis,
said Rebecca Varden, deciding to join in instead of merely enjoying the fight.
However, at our battle station, we had some administrative troubles, and we were unable to coordinate with Lucas. Colonel, I warn you, if you think you can blame this attack and the loss of a valuable asset on our earlier discussion, you're mistaken,
Hart said defensively.
What do you mean, our discussion? As I recall, it was mostly your tirade over Captain Hunter's action on the missions. Now I know where your soldiers get their insubordination. It comes from the top down instead of the bottom up. Your example and Hunter's are detrimental to good discipline.
Mr. Hart, please. This line of questioning is pointless. And as Captain Hunter would say, this should be a debriefing, not an interrogation. The remark made everyone at the table stop to look and turn towards its source. Lighting in the room was kept very low everywhere, except directly over the table. The figure who prowled the shadows around it had been there since shortly after the debriefing began. Until now, it had not spoken, and the light beyond the table was so dim. Hunter could not tell if the figure was a man or a woman. The deep masculine voice that grabbed everyone's attention resolved the question, but the man behind it refused to step out of the shadows and reveal himself. Too little has been said about your actions during the Bauhaus attack, he continued. You showed great skill and courage, Captain. A more cautious man would have stayed out of the battle entirely. A more reckless one would have charged in with weapons blazing and no battle plan. You showed an excellent combination of aggressiveness and skill. The rest of my people did their jobs well, said Hunter, squirming uncomfortably at being the object of so much praise. I only wish I had asked for external fuel tanks when we were at the forward base. You also share the results of your success with your men and accept full responsibility for any failure your unit makes. The Shadow Man paced back and forth behind Hart, the other advisors and military officers lining one side of the table. He was close enough for the soft crunch of his shoes on the room's carpet to be heard. Even so, very little of his features could be seen. Excellent, very professional.
If it wouldn't be too much to ask, can you tell us something about the asset Bauhaus kidnapped? We heard it was a female patient at the hospital. It's very unusual for Bauhaus or any megacorporation to mount a kidnap operation on this scale.
That, Captain, would be telling too much. At least for now, gentlemen. I think this debriefing has run its course. These soldiers are tired and deserve a well-earned rest.
Yes, sir,
Hart said quickly, first looking over his shoulder, then turned to face Hunter.
Captain, we'll have to discuss these matters later. For now, you're dismissed.
Good afternoon, Captain, the Shadow Man added as the squad rose from their seats. I believe we'll meet again. Hunter had only enough time to say a quick thank you before Capitol security guards escorted him and his squad out of the room. Then the main door slid shut behind them. The moon's lighting had increased, and the man at last came out of the shadows to take one of the recently vacated seats.
Mr. Wood, I really would have liked to continue this debriefing for a while longer, said Hart. We need to hear much more about what went on.
And I've had enough, said Noah Hart. He did not wear a military uniform or any advisor's light gray suit. Instead, he wore a dark blue suit, matching tie, and white shirt. Out of place for the semi-arid, semi-tropical climate of Roswell, but the accepted dress for a major stockholder on Capitol's board of directors. That squad is probably the best small unit in Special Forces service. They're experienced, unorthodox, and aggressive, behind both enemy lines and apparently our own.
Mr. Wood, they need to learn more discipline, respect for authority, and corporate protocol. Surely a man who's risen so quickly to a position like yours will understand.
I understand that in our past, the Maverick has accomplished more than the conformist.
Yes, Mr. Wood, we don't live in the past,
Hart instructed, trying not to make it sound like a criticism.
We live in the present and build for the future.
I understand that as well, said Wood, his voice growling sharp. Who do you think reviews and approves of the corporate line in the first place? I now believe if we're to have a future at all, we must entrust it to people like those who built our past.
Mr. Wood, as Captain Hunter's superior, what would you like me to do with him?
Rebecca asked. Unlike Hart, she met his gaze, instead of trying to avoid it.
The charges before us are serious enough to have him taken off duty, even relieved of command.
Quite right, but the situation we face is serious enough for him to be kept on duty, and his squad to be given a new assignment. I want them on the rescue of the kidnapped VIP.
Mr. Wood, please, you would only be rewarding their insubordination, said Hart,
for the moment gaining enough courage to challenge the decision. I fail to see where giving these soldiers an even more dangerous assignment is a reward for them, said Wood, a puzzled look on his face. I'm not sending them to a seaside resort or some pleasure house in the Athena metropolis. This mission will take them into the heart of Bauhaus territory. Chances that they'll return from it are slim. My decision stands. General, Colonel Varden, see that it's carried out. I'll get on to our intelligence and strategic reconnaissance services to track down where this raiding force fled to.
Hey, the shadow guy was right,
said Vanetti, the first member of the squad to step outside the operations center.
It is afternoon.
Yes, mid-afternoon, by the feel of the heat, Hunter added, before he checked his watch. A shame we're not near the ocean. I could use a swim.
Who do you think that man was?
Asked Alvarez,
quickly slipping on her aviator sunglasses. I say he's some corporate VIP, way up the line. Yeah, did you see the way Calvin jumped at his word? Shaka remarked. He sure got his chain snapped. I bet he's a board member, maybe even a stockholder. Hey, why are y'all looking at me like that? Because everybody knows there ain't no stockholder who's ever going to visit this place, said Corporal Mark Harris, Vanitti's assistant and the youngest member of the squad. They all stay on Mars or Luna, and when they come to Venus, the closest they ever get to Roswell is when they land at Atlantis. Whoever he is, he's certainly powerful, said Hunter. And he's not military. He was civilian to Calvin and could hardly care less about what he thought. Whereas, we constantly insult Calvin, but essentially have to do what he demands, said Alvarez, stopping at the base of the stairs leading to the center's entrance and looking back up at Hunter. Maybe Jack's right. Maybe our friend is a big-time corporate. Why don't you have Tim investigate him? If anyone could do it, he can. Actually, I have someone else I want Tim to investigate. Someone you're all forgetting. Who? Bungle? Taylor suggested, pulling off his own pair of sunglasses. You want to find something bad about him and blackmail the jerk? No, that'd be too easy, said Hunter, irritated. The woman, our shadow friend, ended the debriefing when I asked about her. If she's important enough for Bauhaus to kidnap this way, then she must be very important to us, and I'd like to know why. So what should we do, Captain? Said Vanetti. Go back to your quarters and get washed. Get some rest, something to eat, and meet me off base at Tim Small's apartment. We'll be able to talk freely there, and if I know Tim, he'll have a lot to tell us about this morning's adventure.
Mutant Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 2, Frenzy, by John Allen Price. Chapter 3. End.